好，尊敬的王立新副市长，尊敬的吴英主席，各位嘉宾，欢迎大家下午回来再次来聆听我们第11届数字中国这个峰会。其实我一直在想，因为咱们今天呢，已经在大屏幕里大家都分享了对11届 IT 领袖峰会的这样的一个感受。我一直在想这个峰会和深圳的关系。我想呢，这个缘分就是春天，因为深圳是一个春天的城市，而春天的精神呢，就是生生不息，播种希望。所以我说，11岁的我们的峰会，正像一个少年，英雄出少年。我们也希望这样的初心和这样的激情能够一直伴随着我们。所以今天呢，我们首先请出我们从大洋彼岸来的客人他是美国第6资本的创始人 Peter Wissens。Peter 马上给我们带来一个演讲他这个演讲的题目比较深奥，它叫 M2M 的交易价值在2030年将超越人类交易的价值。所以 M2M 就是机器对机器的交易。好，那我们先有请我们生动的 Peter 给我们带来一个生动的演讲，谢谢。
Thank you very much. I have a few things to settle. Hold on. When I showed my slides to Wu Ying and my partners, they asked why I said the year 2030. And I said that I wanted to give myself 10 years so that Wu could come back and say, he first announced this here at Shenzhen Summit in 2019. So I give myself lots of time for my predictions to come true. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I will talk about this machine-to-machine transactions. So I studied mathematics and cryptography at Brown University in the 1990s. It was a time where cryptography had just become decriminalized in the United States, and it was legal for academics to learn about it, even if they were not going to work with the government after. I found it very, very interesting. I spent about 10 years as an entrepreneur and then found new technology, what we now call blockchain technology, Bitcoin white paper, in late 2009, early 2010. And I thought that this technology was very fascinating, and I thought it might have a chance to change the world. And so I spent some time thinking about how I could best help this happen. And in the end, I started the first venture capital-backed Bitcoin company in the world in 2012. And as soon as I launched that, I realized that there was a need for governments and regulators to understand this technology as well and connect with the innovators. And so I started a group called the Bitcoin Foundation in 2013. And that foundation was the global trade organization for Bitcoin. And because of launching that, I was the first person to speak to the US Senate about Bitcoin, the first person to talk to the US Treasury Department, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and ultimately many US agencies that are interested in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, whether it's for enforcement or for innovation reasons. So earlier today, we heard Zhu Ming talk about a search for new areas to grow GDP as the adult labor force shrinks, yeah? So all the countries in the world except in Africa are on the hunt for how we will keep growing productivity and wealth with a shrinking labor force. And he talked at length about AI and the impact of AI on those, productivity. And then we also heard from Hong Kong Stock Exchange, I'll try to say it, Liao Liao Xiaojia, okay, in a fantastic speech where he talked about how value transactions are no longer centralized at an exchange or with the finance, but because we have computers in the mix and we have a knowledge economy, much of the value is being transferred in a decentralized fashion between data providers and other things. And I thought it was very insightful, his talk, and I thought it was fascinating to say we need new accounting systems that we maybe haven't developed yet. And we also, I think there's an implication there that we have maybe new ways to track value. And so what I want to talk to you about really is this machine-to-machine value. And it's probably not something you think about very often right now, about how much machine-to-machine value there is in the world. But it will be quite large. Oh, if I can get my button working. Maybe oh, there we go. Okay. So first of all, what do I call machine-to-machine? So I won't run through this slide very long, but we have cash transactions between people. This is maybe the fundamental form of economic transaction humans started with. As groups grow, then we have other ways that people interact with companies and with governments, yeah? And people have been interacting economically with machines for some time, 40 years, building them, getting data out of them that's valuable. But what I'm talking about right now, today, what I would call machine-to-machine value transmittal and transaction are these things: smart contracts, Bitcoin, and all of the other cryptocurrencies, and then Internet of Things data transactions. So I want to talk about particularly that little slice of the market because that's the only thing I really know anything about. I want to start, though, with talking about an analogous thing that happened. So when we talk machine-to-machine, we're talking about how computers talk to each other. So I want to start with really like the first time in history that we saw this happen, which is with the internet. So starting in 1992, Cisco started publishing data about how much global data was transferred every day around the world on the internet. Many of you were here in 1992. Many of you are interested in technology. It was very, very early days. I think it would be safe to say that there were no businesses running on the internet in 1992. It's an academic era, research era. And my slides cut it all off, but I can tell you the number. It's 0.002 gigabytes per second transmitted globally, 0.002. And that rose to 0.03 gigabytes a second by 1997. So that was rapid growth. We saw, if we jump ahead 5 years again, that number had gone up to 100 gigabytes a second by 2002. And the last data that I could pull from the Cisco report shows us at almost 50,000 gigabytes per second today. So we see this just rapid increase. Now, I want to propose to you a little thought experiment. How much of this data would you say is humans, is people getting data? Okay, so how do we get data? Maybe we like send photos to our family, download a video, post on wishing something interesting. So I'm going to propose to you that there's about 4 billion internet users in the world, that on average it's no more than 100 megabytes a person a day is used, 100 megabytes. So I've drawn a line there. That black line is people at 100 megabytes a day. And the purple line, therefore, everything under it, that's how much data people are sending each other. The rest is all computers. So this is IoT devices, servers, cloud monopolies, anybody that's transacting data where humans aren't involved is the rest of this. And if you think about it, I'm going to propose to you that that human data line is not going to grow very much. It will grow with population. We might download 4K video, maybe 8K video, but we will not be pulling in thousands of gigabytes a day as people in the near future. And I think the point of this conference is that 5G will bring this incredible device density and data density. So I think we'll see this graph grow even further. So over 26 years, that's a compound growth rate of 93%. And actually, I would predict this number will go up with the rise of 5G networks. It will compound at more than 93%. So this is an incredible amount of growth. I want to take again, something I propose to you is the exact same mechanism, how computers talk to each other, but we just talk about payments now, just not about other data, just payments. So my first year in blockchain, about $1 million was transacted globally between machines, machine-to-machine payments, $1 million worth, over the whole year. Last year it was 200 billion. 200 billion. So for a reference number, that's about the GDP of New Zealand. Okay, and I would propose to you, this is like not even a topic much discussed really on these terms, but that's all just in the last 8 years. And that's a 350% annual growth rate over these last 8 years. So this is very remarkable. This year, we've seen the markets pause. So we've seen prices for cryptocurrencies drop, and we've also seen a kind of, I think, a good and quality return to focusing on innovation. A lot of enterprise innovation happening here in mainland China and around the world. And I would say that basically, hype outpaced the technology. And what I want to talk to you about for the rest of my talk is what technology developments will need to come about to sort of have this growth continue, which I believe it will. So we will see a return to some rapid blockchain innovation, and we will, I think, see a return in the markets as well. So I think that slide speaks for itself. There's going to be a huge amount more data created and a lot more access. And a lot, like the network that we're building with a 5G network is a much more densely connected network. These devices will be talking out at the edge. They won't necessarily all be going up to the cloud monopolies. I think if you just imagine in your head that these devices can transact with data, not just with data, but with value, then I think then you start to see the world a little bit like I see it in the future. You start asking, like, what will this look like? And a couple points I want to make about these networks. The first is that because they're so densely connected, and there's incentive for them to talk the same protocols, the same language between the devices, and so it's possible that like as certain forms of economic transaction enter these networks, that they will take over very rapidly. And because the breadth of the network is very wide, but the density is very high, we might see like just a really fast uptake. So if the future goes like the past has gone, and like I predict, it will be very, very quick, this uptake of value transaction out at the edges of the network. And just like in my original graph where I pointed out the vast majority of data in the world is sent just between computers where humans don't even see it anymore, I think that it's likely that this kind of value transaction will also be hard for us to understand. We may, just like an amount of economic transaction the size of New Zealand happened in the last 8 years, not going wholly unremarked, but not being paid attention to particularly. I think this next phase could be a lot like that. If we get 5 years of 350% growth, that would be $370 trillion US transacted. So I gave myself time, over 12 years. If any 5 of those, we get that 350%. And this data, this value will be transacted like not through nation-state banks, not through traditional economic modes, maybe not through traditional centralized stock exchanges. It will be happening out at the edges of the network. But it will be happening on the networks and devices that you make, that the people in this room and the companies represented in this room are building. And I think that it's worth thinking hard about that right now. What do you want to see? What do you want that world to be like? And how would you get a stake in that absolutely enormous economic pie if you were interested in it? So this is what I would tell my limited partners or partners who invest with me, and this is what I'm working on over the next 3 years from an investment side. You'll forgive my numbering. My first layer of infrastructure I talk about is layer 0, and I come from this computer background, so things start with 0 if you're a computer person. So I would say there's 2 layers of fundamental infrastructure development that are being built out right now, and I think those layers are, places where you could build a competitive barrier to entry if you're of a good mind to, or where as you build out like a knowledge base and capacity inside your corporations, that you'll be able to tap this value. And then last, there are, I think, a few interesting areas that are just real businesses, enterprises to look at in the next few years, but it's still very early. So if we want to go at this machine-to-machine value innovation and take part in the economics of it, this is what I'd recommend. So the first, what I would call like layer 0 technology. And this is mostly blockchain infrastructure right now. This is the way that computers can send each other value, is using blockchain technology. There's a few things about this, the state of blockchain today. First of all is that it's very, very slow. Stock exchange runs at millions of transactions a second during high-frequency trading periods. Blockchain runs at like 10 or 20 transactions per second, ones that are out in the world. The so-called, what I would call V3 blockchain would be in the hundreds, but we need thousands or tens of thousands, and you need really like wire speed transactions locally. So this is an area of active research that what I would call V5 blockchain needs to provide. Privacy, we need to continue to maintain the ability, what I would call permissionless transacting. This is one of the core pieces of the technology that let this go global, is that people could just choose to use it if they wanted to and were interested in it. And finally, expanded functionality, the sorts of things that Ethereum provided with smart contracts and that many modern blockchains do, both permission ledgers inside enterprises and public ledgers. So if I add all those up, I would call that like a V5 blockchain, something that's very, very fast, about 1,000 times faster than current ones, and something that still allows developers to pick it up and put it in their devices when they want. And I'm not sort of pragmatic about this, so like my own personal investment strategy for this is to spread bets. There's just a lot of interesting technology, and we invest as broadly as we can in this space. Above that, that's like the pipes. That's like fiber optic cables being laid for the original internet. That's like the very first, that's like NCSA Mosaic's web browser being built, or the servers being built for serving HTTP protocol. Above that, we have what I call layer 1 infrastructure. So in the blockchain land, there's really 5 areas. There's wallets, tokenized assets, decentralized exchange, putting data on blockchains, and identity. So blockchain wallets are an area of active research. Just in the last month, Samsung announced they would have a blockchain wallet on every Samsung S10 phone. So we see that like large enterprises are going at this pretty aggressively. The equivalent to the internet era would be a web browser, like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and I don't think there's a winner in this space yet. A lot of the products are terrible, actually, but we know from the internet it's a lot less useful if you can't use a web browser. So I think I would expect to see somebody or a group of people go out and build a really good interface to these blockchains. Tokenized assets, this is a way that all of these computers can actually deal with value. So these tokenized assets that could represent currency like RMB or Hong Kong dollar, US dollars. They could represent shares in real estate. They could represent commodities or other things. But just a way to represent value. And this kind of thing happens already in every enterprise accounting system. Vendors have bills payable. Customers owe us money, and that's all sort of tracked in these databases. So it's in some level a fancy word, but the difference is getting it out onto the edges of the computing network rather than keeping it internal. Similarly, high liquidity exchanges, ability to exchange value at the edge of the network is another part of this layer 1 infrastructure. Storing more data on these chains. This is an area blockchains are currently weak at, and they're not very good at storing a lot of data. And lastly, identity. Who am I talking to? Am I talking to a person? Am I talking to a computer? and if those of you who know anything about our space know that these are all like very hard problems that are kind of being chipped away at. And my perspective is that in the next year or two, we'll kind of, each of them will get to version 2, and then we'll sort of have this re-explosion of innovation that happens. So, like I said, when I'm thinking about this space, it's currently an era where fundamental infrastructure are the right plays to make. That's exciting. I think that means that there's a chance for corporations, enterprises, innovators to really make a change in the world by putting some time, energy, or money in right now. But there are a couple areas that I want to point your attention to that I think will go hand in hand with this machine-to-machine transaction volume over the next few years. So the first area that we look at is stuff, it's still really early for some businesses, but we are seeing some signs this year. So one's real estate. There are many, many real estate projects that are working on allowing global access to real estate on blockchains. I think that's super interesting. And the second is an area that I'm personally really interested in, is just what we're talking about, machine-to-machine payments, paying AI, letting AI prove that it's done things. And then this last concept, which I think is pretty mind-blowing, things that own themselves. So like imagine a car that owns itself, literally has its own title. You could pay it to use it. There's a lot of like interesting legal work being done around this concept in the States and other places. Like for instance, there's a lawsuit in the Supreme Court of the US about whether or not a lake could sue factories that were polluting it. And it turns out, in the US at least, a lake can sue factories that pollute it, which is pretty fascinating. Layering on top of that smart contracts and the ability to transact economically for these things, I think is just a super interesting area. So I hope I've given you a little flavor of that. I want to just invite you to join me on this process of building out this kind of next generation technology. I think it's going to hit your networks and your devices one way or the other. And it's more fun to do it together. So thank you very much. I think I can say that. 谢谢你的领袖。